Welcome everybody. My name is Yvon Moison, and we will start the webinar, The Transformation of the Asian Agricultural Commodity Market in 2021, organized by the Asian company HQTS. I will present you in a few words HQTS, that is an expert in the quality control. Regarding their expertise in food and agriculture, they focus on different services, like, for example, food quality assurance services, and they provide the services in agriculture, seafood, or anti-infectious food. They also focus on services like factory, store audit and inspection, and some of the other food and agriculture inspection item they focus on is visual inspection, weight measurement, or temperature control, and other safety testing services, including pollution detection or residue detection. I will now introduce you the different speakers. We will have on this webinar Nicolas Ravaillet. Is a European strategy consultant and co-founder of Fidere.eu. We also have Arnaud Petit, Executive Director of the International Grain Council, and Rémi Quérien, that is a supply chain expert at Mondelez International. Arnaud, how are you today? Are you ready for the webinar?
Hello, good morning, Yvon. Good morning to everyone.
So we will focus with you, Rémi, on the major commodities trend in Asia. And you have some few information to present us for today. So maybe you can introduce your presentation.
Hello. So yes, thank you, Yvon. So IGC is, just to introduce in one word, is an intergovernmental organization providing market transparency and cooperation between countries, comprises 56 countries for the moment. And I would like to address particularly the trend of agri-commodities, and more going a focus on commodities and grains and soybean and oilseed complex. And for this, I will share my screen here about first of all, sorry, I have to start the beginning. Yes. So here I would like to remind that in Asia, you have big producers. First of all, we always look about Asia as importing region, but we have to bear in mind that it's very dynamic production area, particularly on wheat, where you can see on ordinate, this is the increase of the next harvest in 21 in comparison to the 5 years average. And the size of the bubble is about the size of the harvest. And you can see today that China and India have more or less the same volume of production like EU27. So definitively that's a region where wheat is a very important crop, and which is also in the use of the consumption of consumers in Asia. If we look at maize, here again you can see China dynamic production starting to increase its production on maize, and slightly less than the US, but still a relevant volume of production. And for soybean, here the size is very low than the two usual, I would say, big players, US and Brazil. But again, you can see here the increase of volumes, a clear rebound from India and China, linked to productivity, but also in area, increase in areas. So definitively, the Asia region is a region where there is a bit of the main commodities we are talking about, and the main commodities also importing. And if we look more specifically on wheat, we have two type of markets in Asia. I would say, first of all, India, yes, India and Indonesia, where they're more and more importing wheat. Just to bear in mind that Indonesia is the second world importers of wheat in volumes, just behind Egypt. India has been to the last 2 years net exporters, but we see most probably with problems and climate change that maybe India could turn more structural importers in the next decade. So this is why India is also a market to monitor in the future. But if we want to look very closely about import for the next marketing year, 21-22, it seems that China will continue to be a relevant importers. We have seen already some reports about 1 million tons bought for the new campaign. So it means China continue to be a very active player on the market. But we have also Pakistan, and Pakistan can continue also to import due to some drought in Pakistan. So definitively in Asia, you have a very dynamic market where the demand is not just 1 or 2 years, but will continue to grow in the future. Second relevant market is maize. Maize is very dynamic, and you see here how Pacific Asia region is a main zone of export of maize. Obviously from North America, from the Americas, North and South Americas. And what we can expect, I would say, for the next marketing year is maybe a slight decrease of volume of imports from that region, mainly because of smaller purchase by China. And I will come back why we could expect a smaller buying from China. But at the same time, we see other countries like South Korea and Vietnam increasing the demand. Particularly, I would like to highlight agriculture. Agriculture is a sector which is growing faster and faster and trying to supply the countries close to Vietnam. So this is why we see here a potential limits of the decrease of purchase from China by other countries in that region. And here, you know that we have seen during the marketing year 2021 sharp increase of buying from China, more or less 27 million tons. As you can see before, indeed China was around 5 to 7 million tons. So it has been a sharp increase, mainly due to the situation what I said, the African swine fever, the disease for the pig meat sector finished in China. So they have been able to recover the pig herds. And the second point is also replenishment of stocks, strategic stocks in China. But we feel that indeed there will be less buying in for the next campaign, particularly because now that China has replenished more or less pig herds. We estimate that 98% of the pig herds has been replenished. Second thing I think is very important and give opportunity for European countries is the fact that government is providing guidelines to reduce maize or soy meal consumption in poultry and pig meat. So which means that for such type of countries, they will need some diversification of sourcing. And the sourcing, particularly for pigs, it is about barley and sorghum. So this is why here that's crops produced in Europe and can find a way to that countries. And second point also why we feel also the buying in could be also less relevant for next marketing year is the fact that the price of maize in China increased tremendously in comparison to the last 5 years, which means would provide some incentives for local producers to increase the maize production. So this is why we expect that China will continue, for example, to increase the production of maize. So I would say in the feed sector, definitively, there is some changes. We could say linked to COVID-19, but mainly I would say after the African swine fever disease, which we have really seen a change in orientation with a diversification of origination and diversification of sourcing. And I think it's very important, and there is new opportunities for the companies. Now, in terms of soybean, you know that when we talk about soybean, we talk only about two countries, Brazil in one hand and China in other hand. China at the moment represents 80% of the total import of soybean. So you see how it is very relevant. We expect a slow increase of soybean import by China, or even maybe a slow decrease for the next marketing year. But what we would like to highlight here, indeed, you have other countries in Asia where we see, and you see the green light below here, there is a tremendous increase, continued increase on use of soybean. We are talking about Philippines, again about Indonesia and Vietnam. And definitively that's the countries to look at in the future, and particularly in the next 5 years, in order to be sure that that countries can be fed and can represent also opportunities for some alternatives, because in the soil complex, oilseed complex, I would say soybean is a main part, but when you have climate event, sometimes rapeseed could become an alternative. And there, I would say also for European producers, it can be also something to look at in the future. Final market I would like to highlight in relation to a dynamic in Asia, it's pulses. Pulses mean about peas, dry peas, chickpeas, and all these categories of commodities indeed represent today 17 to 18 million tons for the global trade. This volume is equal to the total of rapeseed traded around the globe. So you see how now indeed pulses became really a relevant market. And here, if we look about Asia, again, two relevant players. In one hand, India, with a specific import on dry peas and mainly lentils, which are produced also mainly in Canada for the moment. They could be also in Europe. And import from China, and you see here the increase in the last two years, increase of imports, and mainly from dry peas. So that's also, we know that in Europe there is some incentive to diversify the cropping system, to include pulses in EU production system. So therefore, I would say here also there is some opportunities to look at for traders about the pulses market and how Europe, I would say, could benefit from this new demand. We made in the beginning of this year a 5-year forecast just to try to look about how COVID-19 had impacted consumption and production, or could impact, I would say, consumption and production in the commodities. And I would say for wheat, what we have to bear in mind is we will stay for the next 5 years in a very tight situation in stocks, which means if any climate events which would reduce the consumption, the production, the supply of grains, of wheat and milling wheat particularly, can be very sensitive and with a volatile price. And at the same time, which means also that consumption is more and more focusing on milling wheat, and Asian region is definitively a very, very dynamic market. I talk a lot about China, but you have the same trend in Indonesia, in Philippines. All milling wheat and wheat products has been seen regular increase of consumption in that region. So COVID didn't change that trend. The second point is for maize. As I said, a very dynamic market. Here we have some margin of maneuver in terms of supply, intensification of yields, intensification of production, but also a potential new area of production. So I would say it's more relaxed market, but it is right. The impact of COVID, but also African swine fever have shown that the countries now are more and more looking for diversification of sourcing. So that's something to take into account for the future, and alternatives to maize currently are mainly rice, but could become then barley and also some feed wheat. EU is maybe less competitive in comparison to all the area of production, but definitively the maize market dynamics should be very carefully looked, because there is some opportunities in the future. And the last is about soybean. If you look about soybean, so China and Asia, I would say, would continue to be the main area of import or destination of the supply. and mainly from South America. So Brazil and Argentina will be definitively the two main sources of supply to that region. But just to bear in mind that in China, there is a non-GM soybean production, which can represent an interest in EU. So here it's not just looking about what's happened from one end, but to another end, which can be also opportunities for imports. So that's, I would say, the main topics. Here, just remind really wheat and milling wheat, very important. There is a real opportunity there. And in China, but also in other countries like Indonesia. In maize, definitively, Vietnam is a very big player to look at. Pulses a new market to really explore. And I would say ASEAN region, what is very interesting in that region is you have everything in place to do your business, because you have logistics, you have a trade finance. I mentioned here Singapore as a really a clear hub at the moment, but from there you can have your connectivity to all the countries in the ASEAN region. So that's really looking something really to look for the future as a very dynamic market and opportunities for the future. And I would like to thank you again, Yvon, for your kind invitation to be with you today.
Thank you very much, Arnaud. It was a real pleasure to hear from yourself all with the major trends in Asia in 2021, but also in the coming 5 years. So thank you very much again for all the great information you provided. And right now we will switch to Rémi Thérien. Rémi Thérien is an expert in supply chain at Mondelez International. And Rémi will more focus right now on all the major innovation that are the big trends in this industry. So Rémi, how are you today?
I'm fine, thank you, Yvon, and good morning to everyone that is here in the webinar. So I try to share the screen.
And if you can also introduce yourself, and if you can provide more information about what you do at Mondelez, that would be great. Thank you very much.
Okay, so my name is Rémi Thérien. I'm working in supply chain at Mondelez, and I'm working more about the last part of the supply chain, from the industrial producer to the distributor and then the consumer. So I've been there for 3 years, and I will talk to you about the evolution on the supply chain regarding sustainability and efficiency in a global point of view, but also with a case study with my company. So I'll start with the technology topic. It's very important to have in mind that in supply chain, we work more and more with data and with a digitalized supply chain. And we need to share the data with all the members of the supply chain in order to be efficient. And to share this data, it's required to have a standard, to have a compatibility in order not to lose time and to waste energy in converting the data. This data is then included in the information system of the companies. And by putting the data, you give it to all the members of the company, and then it's possible to use it easily. And it will support what is happening on the field with the material and with the good flow in the supply chain. On the data, I want to emphasize on the cyber security, because cyber attacks are unfortunately more and more frequent, and they can put the business down for a couple of hours or a couple of days. So it's important to have this in mind when talking about data. On the supply chain technology point of view, what we have as innovation in Mondelez is the transport tracking. So we worked with a partner to track the trucks, and to be able to know with the GPS where they are at each minute. And this enables us to anticipate the delay and to drive better the activity in the warehouse for inbound trucks that come from the plant to the warehouse, but also for outbound trucks that go from the central warehouse to the regional warehouse of our customers. And it improves customer service because we are able to give them more information about what's happening on the road. The second topic on the supply chain evolutions is regarding the consumer. They are driving changes in the supply chain because we have to adapt to serve the demand. And what we see in 2021, in the past few years, it's the boom of the e-commerce, even for food and for grocery. So we have new channels to serve, the drive and also home delivery. So it forces us to create new partnerships and to be agile in order to bring the product to the consumer. The consumers, they have also new expectations. So expectations about the traceability. They want to know what they eat, where it comes from, and the sustainability about the way of the production and what we do as a company for the sustainability. So these are new tendencies, but it has an impact on the supply chain, and it's long to do the changes. So we have to do it quickly and to start right now. It's already started. I will talk about traceability for the case study I will present to you in a few minutes. Then I will switch to the challenges of the supply chain, because supply chain is driven by constraints, and we have constraints on the capacity and the demand. So in 2021, we have the problem of the lack of containers on the international trade that is leading to increase of costs and to delays. And we can see as well traffic jam on the seas. So for example, there are some ships that are stuck in Los Angeles Bay because the harbor cannot unload them. This is leading again to delays and to increased cost for the transportation. A second thing that we can see nowadays in Western Europe, for example in France, it's a difficulty to hire truck drivers. And then with less capacity on the trucks, the price goes up, and it's also an increase in cost for the transportation. So a threat on the efficiency of the supply chain. The second constraint is the demand. So the COVID impacted the demand, especially on food, because of the restaurants that were closed. People were forced to do more home cooking, and we saw differences in the demand compared to the pre-pandemic situation. So there is a challenge to assess what will be the demand in the next months, in the next years, what changes in the consumption can impact the demand. And also, this is not really related to the pandemic, but another tendency is more and more small and local brands that are suggesting their products, and this will have an impact for international brand and international trade for sure. So now I will talk about a case study. Mondelez France implemented a blockchain for a product that is the Petit Beurre de Lu. It's a small biscuit. This was implemented in the past few years with a partner, and we included 1,300 farmers in the process, because thanks to that, we are able to know where was the field of the wheat that was used to produce the biscuit, when was harvested the wheat, and then with the cooperative, we know in which cooperative the wheat was stocked. After that, it goes to the mills. So we have two mills that are partners in the area of the plant, and we have the information about where was the mill and what was the milling date to transform the wheat into flour. And finally, the plant, so it's La Foissière near Nantes in France, and we have the production date. So all this data is put into the blockchain, and the consumer can have access to it with a QR code on the packet on the biscuit. The information most used by all the partners on this blockchain is the history, so all the data I talked about, the traceability of the batches, so it's possible to trace the batch if there is a problem, the quality monitoring as well, so to compare between different batches, and the certification of the farmers that are included in this project. They are certified on the charter that is called Harmony, that was developed by Mondelez and by Lu, which is the brand. And we can prove this engagement and the respect of the sustainability engagement of this charter through the blockchain. We can also prove the made in France. So this is for the upstream part from Mondelez point of view. We have strengthened links with the different actors. We can prove this engagement, and we can share data more rapidly and securely. So we have advantages upstream, but also downstream towards the customers and the final consumers. So the customers, we can create a trust relation through transparency by showing them how we bake our products. And the consumers, we can do evidence-based marketing towards them by showing them the information and create again the trust. This is a way to conclude on this case study, to create a link between all the actors and to connect all the chain from the field, from the farmer to the consumer at the end of the chain. So this was my part of the presentation, and I can answer some questions.
Thank you very much, Remy, for the presentation. You mentioned a lot the evolution of the usage of the data. In other industry, we can see a lot of startups that emerge in this area, like in the banking industry or in the mobility industry. Do you think that there is, or there are also opportunities for startups to work on this and to emerge and to add new value to your industry?
Yes, sure. That's a very good question, because, for example, on the blockchain project, Mondelez did not work alone on the topic. We are not expert on the technology, so the startups and also third parties that can be not startups but existing for a couple of years are useful, and this is an ecosystem of technology that is working in the supply chain with third parties that have several customers, and an industrial like Mondelez cannot do it alone. So we need those partnerships, and the startups are also supported by the big companies through those partnerships, and supported through by also the government and all the investors. So this is something that is also not only in mobility, but clearly working in the food industry.
And regarding this evolution, as you may know, Mondelez International is a big company. How do you have to adapt to this evolution? I suppose you have to change the way you work, maybe in a more agile way. Do you use a new method of work, like Scrum method, Agile method, this kind of new work method?
Yes, like any big company, we have to be more agile. one thing that is a good point from beer companies is that we have teams in different countries, and we have a lot of teams, so we can take the best of what is done in one team to share it with the other teams. But what I would say is that through the partnerships, we can grow better and find more agility compared to staying alone. And we have to be more agile, and there are in the decision path, it's clear that it has to be shortened nowadays compared to a few years ago.
Thank you very much. You also mentioned regarding COVID-19 crisis that you had to adapt to the new way of consumption by customers. And you mentioned that it was more and more difficult to anticipate the demand regarding what was done in the past. How do you proceed right now to anticipate the demand, and regarding this new way of consumption? How do you work at Mondelez right now to anticipate the production, for example, and so the impact on supply chain?
I would say that on this point, being a big company is an advantage, because we produce in Europe for the different business units. And if there is a decrease in demand, for example, in France, it can be offset by an increase in demand in Italy or in Germany. So on the big scale, there are not that many impacts. But what we have is to do assessments regularly. And to do also different scenarios and to review those scenarios. But nowadays, for the moment, what we did is to put apart the COVID impacts on the demand, and to stay on the base demand that was before COVID. But now we will have to update all of this. But I don't really know. This is only the beginning right now.
Thank you very much. And Arnaud, you wanted to add some insight regarding this question?
Yes. So in terms of COVID-19 and consumption, we have seen different trends depending the regions. And as rightly mentioned, Remy, as a question of habit in Europe, as we can see some changes, but which are not necessarily the same in North America or in Asia, indeed. So I think that's the different regions and the consumers with the different habits. And relating to local chain, I would say that, or local supply chain, as it is a question more and more today in relation also to climate change. I would say, I wouldn't say it is in detriment of the global trade. The main question will the companies have to face is how to harmonize the standards. Because today, and every year we organize a conference and we talk about climate change. And I can tell you, when you put different companies such as Mondelez or Nestle, when we talk about them, what is your action about climate change? You have a different answers. Some of them are talking about water, others are talking about the landscape. So you have a very different approach about climate change or environment. And the question today for the grain sector and all the supply chain here is to try to set up and to harmonize some standards. And I think with that, there will be an easy way then to handle for the global trade from Argentina to a different destination. So I think it's very important today now to look about harmonization of standards. Thank you.
Thank you very much to both of you, Arnaud and Remy. And right now I will switch to our last speaker, Nicolas. Nicolas, I'm very glad to introduce you to this webinar. Would it be possible to introduce yourself and explain what you do?
Hello, good morning, everyone. I'm Nicolas Ravaille. I'm a lawyer and also a teacher. I work on EU policy, EU strategy. That means that the EU trade relation with the world, but also the EU internal market. Then I'm very happy to discuss with you on this question. I think that more on the Asian aspect of the EU relationships.
Yes, clearly. So thank you very much, Nicolas, for this introduction. So would it be possible for you to provide us a global overview of the agricultural community market globally? And more precisely, what do you think are the main challenges of trading commodities today?
First of all, I forgot to say that I am a French native speaker. Then I apologize for my English level. I never lived in an English country, so I will probably speak like a like a French with a huge French accent. I think that you have to consider that EU member states or local authorities have no power to discuss in the field of trade relation. In agriculture, in food industry also, everything is decided by the European institution. That means that they are negotiating agreement with other country. And the EU point of view, they have two way of thinking, or we protect our market, or we ask the other to open their market. And that the second option, the EU decided to claim for that option on go on that way. Means that in Asia we have different agreement. We may have a free trade agreement with Vietnam, for example, or we are now negotiating another agreement on investment with China. We have a global approach. A global approach is to open to an open economy, open on our market, but also open on the other market. We want reciprocity, and then we negotiate with country the agreement by agreement. I do not have a slide to present. I think that you may have all the information on the EU website. It's very well explained. We do not need to see it point after point. It's more clear on their website. You will see a global approach on an approach by country. I also advise you to have a look on the European Parliament website, because they have a very important role in those negotiations. Maybe I can add that it's not because we have trade agreement, free trade or trade on or agreement on investments, that there is no local rule. It's still local rule in Europe. Then it's the same thing in Asia. And of course, EU company who want to go on those markets will have to respect this specific rule.
Thank you very much, Nicolas. Maybe could you illustrate with two concrete examples? Maybe if you could compare one trade agreement with a specific country in Asia compared to another one, and what are the main differences among the two countries?
It's very a question of on country. As I told you, I think that the most advanced agreement is with Vietnam. We will have a free trade agreement, means that there will be no barrier, that trade will be free. Again, it's not because it's free that you will not have to respect the EU rule if you come into our internal market. And of course, it's exactly the same thing if you go on the Vietnamese market. And the other example is China. China is a very big market. It's very important for the EU to keep a good relationship. We said to the Chinese that they can come on our market, and we want them to open more their market. It's what we are now negotiating, and it's also why your webinar is so important. That's the time to do it, because we are not at the end of the negotiation, but it's now that the EU company must prepare themselves go on that market. It's the time to do it in order to be ready when there will be more in position situation to go on the specific market. So it's a very good thing to have this. And you again, you can follow the negotiation on the EU website step by step. It's now a question of agreement with the Council, the European Parliament, but I cannot assure you 100% that it will be concluded at the end, but people are very confident on that situation.
Thank you very much. Would you have any advice for a company, a French company, for example, if they wanted to focus on the Asian market? Would you have any advice for them?
Yes, I think that if the EU is in charge of the negotiation, the EU institution, they do not have the possibility to help the company to go on that. Maybe you can ask the EU if you have rules interpretation for rules interpretation or thing like this, if you think that there is an unfair situation. But the EU institution will not help each company. I think that it's still the member state or maybe the local authority who will do it. But if you have to respect the specific rule, I don't know if it's organic rule, if it's a specific rule on health for health or things like this. I think that it's very, very difficult for an European company to go on an Asian market alone. Then they need to ask other help and to work together with Asian company. I think that the best solution will be very, very helpful, and it will go faster on safety. They will not lose their time on their investment. And I can say that exactly the same thing if you are an Asian company and you want to go on the European market. You will meet the same problem. Don't go alone. Try to work together, ask help, and consider that the EU is here to help you if you have a rule problem with the rules, or if this is an unfair situation. But to work very concretely, work together, ASEAN and European company.
Thank you very much, Nicolas, for all this advice and all this information. Now it's time to switch to the last part of the webinar, that is the Q&A session. So do not hesitate to ask your questions in the chat. And I can see, Remy, that the first one is for you. There is a question about this global trends that we have right now. So the question is the push towards more local consumption and production going to affect large companies like Mondelez in their production and distribution, emerging of more local brands, etc.?
Yes, thank you for the question. The first thing I would like to address to this question is that it's hard to know before what will be the demand, but completely to answer, at Mondelez, like other big groups, we have global brands and local brands. So what I talked about in the case study, the Petit Beurre de Lu, it was a historical local brand in France. So it will not affect the capacity to propose local brands, because we already have some local brands. So we don't know what will be the future about the different local brands, but what we already have, it's an asset to answer the local demand. So we also have a tendency to be interested by what is happening with new brands, small startups, and you know that acquisitions are also happening in the food industry and can change the situation.
Thank you very much. Do you have any concrete example at Mondelez International? Did you already bought some brands or some companies to avoid any loss of market share? Is it the case right now at Mondelez? Do you already have concrete examples?
I don't have example in France, but what was it was a case in UK in the beginning of the year, a brand that is called Grenade, that's cereal bars, and we bought it. So I'm not in the strategic level of the company, but I can think that it's a way to answer this question of local and of market share. Yes.
Thank you very much. Do you also have a specific programs at Mondelez International where you can have the chance to create your own startup? Do you have a kind of intrapreneurship program?
Yes, there is one, but in the US business unit that is called Snack Future. Yes, it's an entrepreneurship program, but it's more located next to the headquarters in the US.
Okay, and so you have also incubators to have startups working with you very closely at Mondelez.
I don't have the information for incubator, but what I know is that at least on the supply chain aspect, we have partnerships with third-party actors, and they can have at their level partnership with startups, but I don't have more details.
Thank you very much. One question right now for Arnaud. Arnaud, you spoke a lot about Asia, and it was a real chance for us to have so many information regarding the major trends. If we compare with the trends to other parts of the world, what are the main differences that you can see in Asia compared to, I don't know, Africa or Europe? What are the main differences and similarities?
Thank you. I would say that what is really specific to Asia is the dynamic of the food consumption. You know, grains are mainly, or the consumption of grains are mainly driven by demographic trend, and the demography in Asia continue to be very dynamic with increased population levels. So we see really food consumption continuing to increase, particularly the slight change of diet from rice to wheat-based products. We have been very surprised, for example, during the COVID-19 crisis, to have seen the consumption of wheat-based product continuing to be the same and not having a switch to rice, which has been used, the usual commodity, I would say, for the ASEAN population. So definitively, we see that the milling wheat is definitely, and wheat-based products are very dynamic in ASEAN region. In comparison, for example, to Africa, I would say where the level of consumption of wheat is really high already, more or less at the same level like North Africa. I'm talking about North Africa countries, which are more or less at the same level like in EU. So that means really the only change in North Africa will come from demographic region, where in Asia you have still demography and change of diet. So definitively the ASEAN region should be look about food consumption for milling wheat. I mentioned about pulses, and I would say also we have to look about some starch products in the future.
Thank you very much. One question for Nicolas. Nicolas, during the preparation of this webinar, you told me that the approach of the EU could be compared like a welcome economy approach. So similar questions like the one that I asked to Arnaud. What are the advantage and the potential risks of this situation of welcome economy adopted by the EU, and maybe if you could compare to what other regions in the world tend to do in terms of trade agreement, and in your point of view, what are the advantage and disadvantage of this political situation in terms of trade agreements?
I think that, thank you very much for your question. I think that it's difficult to understand for people mostly in the south of Europe that Europe is not protecting more its own economy from other country, other part of the world, and probably it will not change. Sorry, there is no agreement to change that. So that means that you have no choice. EU will not protect your own market. So if it's not except if it's unfair, except if you meet an unfair, if the competition is not really fair. And it's a lot of interpretation on that. It's very, very, very complicated to move on that question. And I will not advise to a company to except if there is a specific problem to think like this. I think that it's not if you speak about trade war, you cannot really try to defend you. The only solution is to attack. I speak on an economic point of view. It's what you want to from their own company. Go outside, go on the other market in the North America, in South America, in Africa, everywhere in the world, and then also in the Asian part. The balance with Asia is not very good for you. It's why they negotiated those trade agreement. And it's why we want our company to go on that market. And it's also why they need help to go on that market. We know absolutely that it's very difficult to do it alone. And you will not succeed if you just look at the rule. If you do look at the EU agreement, it's a condition, but it's not enough. And it's why you really need to be prepared. And that's again, it's time to do it. It's time to do it. I think that just to say, it will be very difficult to protect you on your own market. Then the best solution is to go outside.
Thank you very much, Nicolas. And maybe a last question for you, Rémi. So as Nicolas said, his advice is to avoid to go alone to make business in Asia. You also mentioned that you worked more and more with external companies, from startups to big ones. Maybe if you could think about a new innovation or a new project, what concretely could you imagine to do with a company like HQTS? Do you have a concrete example on potential projects or innovation you could develop together?
I don't have great ideas right now on this, but what I know is that for the past projects that were developed, usually for a big company like Mondelez, but I think that it's the same for other companies. When you have a past experience that worked well, it's a good advantage in order to get new partnerships in the future. So what we observe in the supply chain, what I observe is that a good third party is working with a lot of customers, because if it worked well with Mondelez, it will work well with Mars, it will work well with L'Oreal, or I don't know, other companies. So what we observe is that the software for providers, for example, they work with a lot of different industrials. So if you have this capacity to prove that it worked well with one company, it's a big asset to work with other ones in the future. And to answer the question of an idea, what we know is that we use more and more data, more and more artificial intelligence. In the warehouse, we have projects on automated warehouses that are developed by Amazon, for example. We don't have this at Mondelez, but this is something that can be another tendency in the supply chain in the next few years, to have more robots, especially on the tasks that are physically hard for humans.
Thank you very much to all of you for all the different great information you provided to us. So it was very nice to hear about you, Nicolas, and to learn more about what were the major trade agreement and the position of the EU regarding commerce with area. It was also very nice to hear about the major trends with you, Arnaud, and also with you, Rémi, on all the great innovation you launched at Mondelez International and the new way of working you've mentioned. To conclude this webinar, I just wanted to highlight again the different services provided by HQTS that could help you in this new transformation of the agriculture industry. So HQTS provided such services like inspection and more concretely pre-shipment inspection, sampling services, loading supervision, for example. They also provide services like supplier audits, and it could be social compliance audits, factory technical capability audits. They also provide services like testing, including non-GMO testing, physical testing, or chemical component analysis. And supervision supervises, including warehouse supervision, transportation supervision, something that mentioned Rémi during his speech, something that will be more and more developed with more and more data available in the future, including AI, like mentioned by Rémi, and already including blockchain. And also HQTS provides supply chain management in manufacturing, including all the processes like project management, advanced planning, and scheduling. And also you can benefit from HQTS to increase visibility of supply chain management in manufacturing. They will help you to have quick launch of new products and consistent product quality, on-time delivery, and cost effectiveness of overall supply chain operation. Thank you very much again to our three speakers, Nicolas, Rémi, and Arnaud, for all the information you provided. This webinar has been recorded and will be sent to you to all the audience, but I thank you also for all the questions they ask. And if you have any question, please feel free to connect with HQTS, so you can have here their email address and their phone number. So do not hesitate if you have any question. Thanks again, Nicolas, Rémi, and Arnaud. Hope to see you again, maybe for a future webinar sponsored by HQTS. And I wish you, all of you, a very nice day, and hope to see you in the near future. And thank you again to Alex, Rohan, and all the people from HQTS that helped me to organize this webinar focusing on the future of the agriculture industry. Thank you very much. Have a good day. See you. Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.